Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Panels to Frames. Tonight we're going to be doing a summary and recap of all the comic book superhero movies from the 1940s. If you want to check out a whole video dedicated to each of them, you can check out the links in the description below. We're going to hand out some awards at the end, so stick around for that. So with that, let's get started. The 1940s contains 6 live-action comic book superhero films, which are The Adventures of Captain Marvel, Spy Smasher, Batman, Captain America, Superman, and Batman and Robin. This would be the decade with the most superhero movies in it until the 1980s, and in the time in between we had a handful of movies, a few television shows, and possibly the most important superhero movie ever put on film. But I digress. So this is a quick breakdown of the movies per company at this point. DC Comics is at 3, Fawcett Comics is at 2, and Timely Comics, aka Marvel Comics, is at 1. DC would only increase this lead in coming years. These films had some consistent elements in it, such as the villain trying to obtain a superweapon, the heroine is always captured at some point, the henchmen usually wore sharply dressed suits, as was the fashion back then, and the final battle ended very quickly, sometimes within the matter of 2 minutes. There was also some consistency behind the camera, with both Republic and Columbia each making 3 serials. Will Whitney and Spencer Gordon-Bennett each directed 2, and writers Ronald Davidson and Joseph Poland had a big say in what went into the early comic book films, with one or both of them having a hand in 5 of the 6 films. The only one that they didn't write was Superman. All the movies featured are serials, which by definition means that they used serialized storytelling. You might be familiar with that nowadays because it's what many TV shows use, as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DCEU. But because almost no one had a television back then, and streaming movies nor Blu-rays were even invented at that time, basically all these movies relied on using action-filled and suspenseful cliffhangers at the end of each part, so audiences would have to come back every day or every week to watch it. Each movie had, at best, a meager budget. The average cost of these 6 films was about $200,000, which is just over $2 million in today's money, and they cut corners wherever they could, whether it was a superhero's costume, or the time that they were allotted to shoot, which is usually about a month, or the special effects. To give you an idea of some of the cost-cutting measures that they used, the script for Captain America wasn't originally meant for him, they just modified it to him. The costume for Batman and Robin wasn't tailored to the actor, so they just went ahead and used it anyway, and it's, let's say, ill-fitting. And producers on Superman found it hard to mask the wires whenever he was in flight, so they just scrapped that all together, and whenever he goes to fly, he turns into a cartoon. This is probably why, of the 6 films that were made, only 2 of them featured heroes that had superpowers or abilities: Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, and Superman. The rest of them were just punch-throwing scrappers, and that probably saved a lot in the special effects budget. What Captain Marvel and Superman also have in common is they're the only 2 heroes that get origin stories. The other ones just throw you right into the action. This is a little surprising considering that Batman never references his dead parents even once, and Captain America not only doesn't have the super soldier serum, he's not even Steve Rogers. Spy Smasher was the only one to have a villain original to his own comics in The Mask. Batman had a DC villain, but it wasn't directly his, like if they did a Green Lantern movie with Captain Cold as the villain. Still a DC villain, but not a direct Green Lantern villain. Villains like the Joker, or any Batman villain for that matter, and the Red Skull or the Nazis for Captain America weren't present. Superman didn't even face Lex Luthor until 1950, but that's sort of spoilers for our next video. All of these films, in one way or another, shaped the groundwork for superhero movies for years to come. But serials fell out of fashion at the beginning of the 1950s along with superhero comics, for various reasons that we'll discuss in an upcoming video. There's a reason that this decade had the most superhero movies until the 1980s. Although they laid a groundwork for things to come, it was a shaky one that had to rebuild its reputation in a few decades, but it was groundwork nonetheless. If I may editorialize for a moment here, none of these films are particularly anything great. They're very long, and styles in filmmaking have changed quite a lot in the 70-plus years since these films have hit the big screen. They're just not something that you really go back and watch maybe more than once or twice. Maybe you search for a certain moment, or you watch a bit just to remind yourself how truly good we have it now. But to be frank, most of these films were made for a quick buck. The movie studios making these were making film serials. They were trying to release them as fast as they could make them. And I believe the combination of the low budget quality and inherent silliness gave it a certain reputation, and made it difficult for general audiences to take these films seriously, and some even share that sentiment about superhero films today. I'm sure the writers, directors, and actors gave it their all in the time that they were allotted, but the limitations of the budget, the era in which they were made, and the intentions of the studio kind of sealed the fate on these ever being considered timeless classics. Nevertheless, the people who worked on this were on the forefront of history, whether they realize it or not. Without the risks that everyone took involved in these productions, we simply wouldn't have the superhero movies or action movies in general that we have today. Anyway, on to the awards. I promised that we would do it. We're doing it right now. Let's go. So the biggest change award goes to Captain America for changing Steve Rogers into Grant Gardner, not battling the Nazis in a film made during World War II, using no super soldier serum and having no Bucky. How can you have a Captain America movie without any of those elements? It is simply baffling. For best moment, I'd say it's when Batman jumps onto a moving train in Batman and Robin. I don't know if this effect was done in real life or not, but it's just really cool, especially for the time, because it looks real. I'm willing to bet it might be real. I hope it wasn't, because that probably put the actors' lives in danger, but real nonetheless. For best villain, I'd have to go the Scorpion from Captain Marvel. He just set the tone for the villains for the rest of the decade, and even came face to face with the hero in the middle of the serial and still got away. That's a rarity for serial films like this. My runner-up is Dr. Daka from Batman. He probably would have had it, but he's just such a racial stereotype, and the movie he's in is just so bad. For best sidekick, I would go Lorna Gray as Gail Richards in Captain America. Apologies to both Robins. Gail Richards does not adhere to the typical damsel in distress tropes that plagued heroines for so long. There actually might even be an argument that she's better than Captain America. This version of Cap got his butt kicked more than a few times. The Best Hero award goes to Kirk Alyn as Superman. He actually does a pretty good job, to be honest, and his performance is really overshadowed in history by Christopher Reeve and George Reeves. Although it's still off-putting when he flies and turns into a cartoon, he kind of set the standard for heroes to come. For worst movie, it's Batman, and it's not even close. Right off the bat, pun very much intended, this film just has some racist overtones that can't and shouldn't be forgiven. But beyond that, it's just so boring and contrived. This film excludes so much of what makes Batman, Batman. It was an overly convoluted plot, and there was bad action, and it was by far the toughest one that I had to watch for this project. Our runner-up for best movie is Superman. It probably would have taken the cake, but the middle parts are literally sometimes the same, and the animated Superman is just really weird. But the first 5 parts of that film are great, though. And our big winner is Spy Smasher, a hero I had literally never heard of until we started this channel. You could probably make the case that this is the grandfather of all modern action films. The director of it, Will Whitney, actually directly influenced Quentin Tarantino, and the movie starts off with a bang, literally, and there is no stretch longer than 3 to 5 minutes in between action sequences. This film just goes. For a film from the 1940s, it is very fast-paced and consistent. Admittedly, the film probably benefited from not having any modern counterpart to compare it with, and it was nice having some fresh eyes on it, and it also gets brownie points for having a villain original to the comics in it. So that's all of the comic book superhero films from the 1940s. If you liked this video, please give us a like and then subscribe to our channel. We thank you for watching.